The pod felt like a drop-stoned NO engine. No guide system, just a metal shell tumbling through the purple clouds of Durin 4, and Nora Voss sitting inside it with her knees pulled to her chest, counting her breaths. Point 1, 2, 3. That she was not praying. She was not crying. She was running numbers. 40 hours of oxygen in the filter mask. One cracked survival pack. A field recorder clipped to her wrist. 2 protein bars in her left pocket. One broken emergency communicator that might work and might not. That was what she had. 6 weeks ago, she had been crouched in a riverbed in Montana, tagging wolf prints in the mud. Then the light came down. Then the cold. Then the white room, and the tall gray aliens with flat eyes, and the one called Ambassador Drell, who spoke perfect English in the way that made it clear he had learned only to explain something unpleasant he had read from a long document. Most of it was politics she did not understand. Trade routes, territorial rights, a creature on a planet called Durin 4 that was disrupting shipping lanes. Something about a protocol. The important part was simple. They needed to send someone to the planet. Someone expendable. A lower species. An offering, Drell had called it. To show respect to the creature. To keep the peace. Nora had looked around the chamber. Dozens of alien delegates. Different shapes, different colors. Every one of them looking at their own hands or the ceiling or anywhere except at her. She had said one thing. Has anyone actually tried talking to it? Drell had blinked slowly. Then the guards came. Now she was falling. The pod hit the ground hard enough to crack the side panel and throw her into the wall. She lay still for 3 seconds, checking for pain. Left shoulder. Minor. She sat up, pushed the cracked door open with both feet, and crawled out into Durin 4. The air hit her filter mask in one thick wave. The sky was the color of a bruise. Tall black rock formations rose up on all sides like broken teeth, and between them the ground was flat and dark and scattered with loose gray stones. The wind moved in long, low pulses, not sharp, more like breathing. Like the planet itself was breathing that IT was cold. Not Montana winter cold. Deeper than that. Nora stood, rolled her shoulder, decided it was fine, and began looking around. The pod had come down in a low, flat area between 2 rock ridges. Some kind of valley. Fog sat heavy at the base of the rocks and moved slowly in the wind. Visibility was maybe 40 meters in any direction. She unclipped her field recorder and clicked it on. Day 1, she said quietly. Landed hard. Suitzal intact. Filter mask holding. Beginning area survey. She found the cracked survival pack 10 meters from the pod, thrown clear on impact. Most of it was useless. The emergency flare was shattered. The water recycler still worked. The thermal blanket was intact. She took everything that functioned and left the rest. Then she found the bones. They were near the base of the left rock ridge, half covered in loose stones as if the wind had slowly buried them. A full suit, human-sized. Then another, 10 meters further. Then a third, near the ridge wall. All of them old. All of them in the same posture, curled tight, like they had died, trying to make themselves small. None of them had been eaten. No marks on the suits, no sign of violence. They had simply stopped. Fear, Nora thought. Or cold. Or both. She stood among the bones and was quiet for a moment. Then she looked around at the fog and the black rocks and the purple sky, and she made a decision. She was not going to sit down and wait to die. That was not something she knew how to do. She chose a flat rock near the center of the valley, far from the ridge walls and with open sight lines in every direction, and she set up what she could. Thermal blanket, water recycler, recorder on. She sat down cross-legged, pulled the second protein bar into her lap as a reserve, and began to watch. An hour passed. The fog shifted. The wind breathed. Then she heard a low sound, not a growl, not exactly. More like the sound a mountain would make if a mountain was moving. A deep, slow vibration that she felt in her chest before she heard it with her ears. It came from the far end of the valley beyond the thickest bank of fog. Something was walking. The fog moved. The black rocks to the north shifted in her vision, and then she realized they were not rocks. One of them was breathing. One of them had eyes point 2 pale lights in the dark, each one the size of a dinner plate, fixed directly on her. Below them a shape so large it blocked the fog behind it. Heavy and slow and absolutely silent now. Watching her the same way she was watching it. Nora did not run. She did not stand up. She picked up her field recorder, clicked it on, and spoke in the same quiet tone she used in every field log she had ever made. Subject is large, quadrupedal, pale eyes, highlight sensitivity likely, has been aware of me longer than I have been aware of it. She paused, has not charged, has not made an aggressive display. It is just looking at me. She looked back. Beginning observation log, she said. This is going to be interesting. 22 hours on Duran 4 and Nora Voss was still alive. She had kept the recorder running through the night. When the cold got bad, she wrapped the thermal blanket around her shoulders and sat very still and kept talking in a low voice, not because she thought anyone was listening, but because it helped her think. The creature she had named Rook had circled her camp 3 times in the dark. She tracked it by sound. That deep chest vibration she could feel more than hear, and by the occasional shift of pale light in the fog when its eyes caught the glow of her recorder. IT never came closer than 30 meters. It never made a sound that felt like warning. It just moved in long, slow circles, the way a very large thing moves when it is not in any hurry, and then it settled somewhere to the north and went quiet in the morning, which on Duran 4 was just a slightly lighter shade of purple in the sky. Nora went looking. She found what she had expected to find. Previous offerings. 7 sets of remains scattered along the base of the eastern rock ridge and tucked into 2 shallow alcoves in the cliff face. Different suit designs. Different sizes, some clearly not human, smaller or wider or shaped differently. All of them in the same posture as the first 3. Curled. Still, none of them had marks on them. She checked every single one that Rook had not killed them. She sat on a flat stone and thought about that for a long time. The Galactic Council had sent living things to this planet for 200 years and told themselves it was diplomacy, told themselves the creature demanded blood, and not one of them had ever checked. Not one of them had ever looked at the evidence sitting right here on the ground. The offerings had died of exposure, of fear, of giving up. Rook was not a killer. Rook was a very large, very old animal that lived alone on a rock planet, and had spent 2 centuries watching small, frightened things arrive in metal pods and curl up and stop moving. It probably did not understand what was happening any better than they did. Nora pulled out her recorder. I want to note for the record, she said, that the Galactic Council has been conducting ritual sacrifice for over 200 years based on a complete misreading of animal behavior. She paused. Someone is going to have a very bad week when this gets out. She clipped the recorder back to her wrist and walked back toward the center of the valley. Rook was already there. IT had moved while she was at the ridge, and now it stood at the edge of her camp with its head lowered, not threatening, just close. In the daylight, if the gray-purple sky counted as daylight, she could see it properly for the first time. IT was enormous. 4 heavy legs, each one as wide as a tree trunk, with thick curved claws that clicked softly on the rock as it shifted its weight. A broad flat head, almost reptilian, with those pale disc eyes set wide apart. Covered in something between scales and heavy plating, dark gray-brown, scarred extensively along the neck and shoulders from what looked like very old fights. And on its left flank, visible even from where she stood 10 meters away, a wound. Not old, not fresh either. It sat somewhere in between. The edges were dark and the tissue around it was swollen. It had been left untreated. There was nothing on this planet to treat it. Nora looked at the wound for a long time. Then she looked at the creature's face. It was watching her with the same flat, patient attention it had shown since she arrived. No aggression in it. No hangya. Just watching. She thought about her field kit. There was a basic medical wrap in the survival pack. Some antiseptic cloth. Not much. She thought about the 30 meters of distance between them. She sat down on the ground. Not on a rock. Not on any raised surface. On the ground, which put her below Rook's eye level and took away any possibility of being read as challenging. Then she started talking. Not to Rook specifically. Just talking in the same low, flat tone she used for recorder logs, describing what she saw, describing the wound, describing the rock formations to the east, describing the way the wind moved differently through the northern pass than the southern one. Just words. Just her voice, even and calm in the cold air. Rook did not move. After 2 hours, she stopped talking. She picked up a small flat stone near her hand and set it a meter in front of her. Then she sat back and was quiet, an offering of a different kind. Rook looked at the stone, and it took one slow step forward, lowered its massive head, touched the stone once with the end of its nose, very gently, and then looked at her. Nora picked up another stone and set it next to the first. Rook touched that one too. She logged it at the end of the day, after Rook had retreated to the north, and she was sitting alone in the falling dark with the thermal blanket around her and the recorder light blinking. Subject is not aggressive, she said. Subject has not eaten in the period of my observation and shows no hunting behavior. Subject is responding to non-threatening interaction with curiosity rather than dominance. She stopped, looked out into the dark where the pale eyes were just barely visible. Subject is lonely, she said. The recorder light blinked. So, am I? She added and clicked it off. On the morning of day 3, her suit oxygen ran out. She had known it was coming. She had been watching the gauge since she landed, doing the math every few hours the way a sensible person does when the math is the difference between living and not. When the gauge hit 0, she held her breath for one long second, then pulled her filter mask from her belt and pressed it to her face. The air of Duran 4 tasted like cold metal and something faintly chemical, like the inside of an old engine. But it moved into her lungs and back out again, and nothing went wrong. The filter held. She breathed. Then she logged it. Suit oxygen depleted. Switched to filter mask. Atmospheric composition is breathable for now. We'll monitor. She clicked off the recorder and looked out from under the rock overhang she had claimed as camp. The overhang was wide and low, tucked in the base of the northern ridge, sheltered from the worst of the wind. She had chosen on day 2 for one simple reason. Rook slept 20 meters to the east of it. Nothing on Duran 4 had come near her camp once. She suspected nothing on Duran 4 wanted to come near Rook. She was using a predator as a fence. Her field supervisor back in Montana would have called that creative. He also would have been horrified. Rook was awake, sitting on its usual flat expanse of rock with both eyes half closed in what she had started reading as a resting state. The wound on its left flank was visible from here. It had not improved. The swelling was worse. Nora opened the survival pack and looked at what she had. The medical wrap, 2 squares of antiseptic cloth, a small tube of tissue sealant meant for suit punctures, but the chemistry was close enough to matter. The problem was the distance point. 3 days of patient sitting and stone offering had gotten Rook comfortable with her presence at about 8 meters. The wound was on its left side. She needed to be at 2 meters, maybe less, and she needed Rook to hold still while she worked on it. She spent the whole morning on approach, not trying to reach the wound, just shrinking the distance 1 slow meter at a time over hours, sitting down after each step, waiting until Rook's breathing stayed even, then moving again. It was the most boring and most careful work she had ever done. More careful than the wolf work. More careful than the black bear study in her second year. By midday, she was at 4 meters and Rook was watching her with those pale disc eyes, and its breathing had not changed. She sat there for 2 hours without moving. Then she stood up very slowly, took 1 step forward, and pressed her open palm flat against Rook's side. Rook went completely still. Not tense, not coiling to strike, just absolutely still, the way something goes still when it does not know what is happening and is deciding what it thinks about it. Nora kept her hand flat against the plating. It was warm, much warmer than she expected, the way a living thing is warm from the inside. Under her hand, she could feel a very slow, very deep heartbeat. She stood there for a long time. Then she moved her hand toward the wound. Rook flinched. She stopped. Went back to the original spot. Waited. Started again. It took 3 more days before she could touch the wound without Rook pulling away. 3 days of the same patient approach and retreat, the same calm voice, the same flat open hand. On the 3rd day, Rook lowered its head and held very still and let her work. She cleaned the wound, applied the antiseptic cloth, used the tissue sealant along the worst edge. It was not a complete fix, but it was something. It was a beginning. Rook was quiet through all of it. When she finished and stepped back, it turned its head and looked at the wound and then looked at her. Just looked for a long time. That evening, Rook brought her something. She was sitting at camp writing notes when she heard it approaching, that deep vibration in the ground, and then a heavy thud a few meters away. She looked up. Rook had set down a large flat stone, warm from somewhere deep in the rock, near the edge of her camp. Then it stepped back and waited a warm stone. Like a gift, she logged it in a slightly unsteady voice. Subject has begun reciprocal behavior, responding to care by providing warmth. This is not instinct. This is communication. A week later, she came back to camp to find a dead animal beside her water recycler. Rook was sitting nearby watching her. The animal was large and had already been killed cleanly. She did not eat it, but she did not push it away either. She moved it respectfully to the side and looked at Rook and said quietly, "Thank you." Rook blinked both eyes slowly. She had read somewhere that slow blinking in certain animals meant trust. She blinked back, slowly, feeling a little ridiculous. Rook made a sound she had not heard before. Low and brief, not a growl, something warmer than that. She sat down against its side, opened her notes, and wrote at the top of a fresh page in large clear letters. No one ever tried. That is all this ever was. 14 days after the offering pod landed on Duran 4, Ambassador Drell called an emergency session that he stood at the head of the long curved table in the council chamber and looked out at 30 delegates from 22 species and tried to explain why the human biosign was still active. Equipment degradation, he said. The pod suffered a hard landing. The tracking unit is likely running on residual charge and broadcasting a false positive. Several delegates nodded. One did not. Her name was Delegate Yun, and she was junior in rank and 7 months new to the council. And she had spent 3 of those months reviewing old offering protocol records because no one else wanted to, and someone had to file them. She knew the landing impact data from the past 40 offerings. She knew what residual charge signatures looked like. This was not that. Ambassador, she said, the signal is not degrading. It has moved. On 6 separate occasions over 14 days, it has changed position in ways consistent with a living subject on foot. Drell looked at her the way a person looks at a stain on a table. Your concern is noted, Delegate. I would like a drone survey, she said. The room was quiet for a moment. Drell said he would consider it, which everyone in the room understood to mean no, but Yun filed the survey request in writing before the session closed, and under council rules, it had to be processed within 48 hours. Drell knew the rules as well as she did. He authorized the drone that he expected it to confirm equipment failure. The drone footage came back in 12 hours. The chamber was full when he played it. He had not intended for that. He had intended to review it privately and file a quiet dismissal. But units in a session noticed to every delegate before he could, and so all 30 of them sat in their chairs and watched the screen. The human was sitting on a flat rock. She was writing something in a handheld notebook. Her filter mask was pushed up onto her forehead. Her posture was relaxed. Her camp behind her was organized, a thermal blanket folded neatly, a water recycler running, small objects sorted into clear groups. And behind her, taking up most of the background of the image, curled like a hill that was also an animal, with both enormous pale eyes half closed, was the beast of Duran 4. The beast was asleep. An O1 in the chamber spoke for a very long time. Drell recovered first. He was a practical person in the way that people are practical when they are protecting something. He straightened his jacket and cleared his throat and said, "The subject has clearly disturbed the creature's natural patterns. We are looking at a temporary anomaly. This cannot hold. She is alive," Yun said. "For now, it has been 14 days. No offering has survived 3. Yun stood up. Her hands were flat on the table. "Ambassador, if this creature is capable of tolerance, of allowing a living being to remain in its territory for 14 days without harm, then it is not behaving like a mindless predator, which means everything we have told ourselves about this protocol is wrong." Drell's voice was flat and careful. "What we told ourselves is that the stability of the Duran 4 shipping corridor requires a managed relationship with the territorial creature on that planet. That has not changed. The method has changed. The human found a method. The human is one data point. The human is a data point that is sitting next to the beast writing notes in a notebook. Yin said. Some delegates looked away. Some looked at the frozen image on the screen. Drell let the silence run for 10 seconds. Then he said, in the tone of someone closing a door, that the session was adjourned. He would review all available data and provide a recommendation within 24 hours. The recommendation came in 18. A planetary cleansing strike. Standard orbital package. Authorized on the grounds of territorial containment. Both subjects, the creature and the offering, classified as compromised variables in an active protocol zone. Yin read it at her desk and sat very still for a moment. Then she pulled up her communication system. She did not have contacts on the outer lanes. She was 7 months into the job, and she was junior, and she did not know the right people. But she knew one cargo hauler who owed her a transit favor and who ran a regular loop through the outer Duran system. She sent him a single message. 2 words and a set of coordinates. She did not know if it would reach anyone in time. She did not know if Nora Voss had any way to receive an incoming transmission. She did not know a great many things. What she knew was that she had filed 14 offering protocol records in 3 months, and every single one of them was a death. And somewhere on a burnt sky planet, a human woman was sitting next to a monster that had chosen not to be one, and the council was going to burn them both. She sent the message, 72 hours, she thought. That was how long it would take for the strike to be prepared and approved by the logistics team. She hoped it was enough. The communicator buzzed at midnight. Nora had been asleep against Rook's side, which was the warmest place on the planet and also apparently the safest because nothing had come near the camp in 2 weeks. She was up before the second buzz, mask on, recorder in hand, the way a person who grew up camping in bear country learns to wake up. The signal was garbled, patchy and broken. A voice she did not know, alien and filtered through a bad relay, speaking careful English with a strong accent. 2 words came through clearly. Run. Strike, then static. Nora sat in the dark and looked at the sky. She did not panic. She thought. Panic was a fast-burn resource, and she had learned a long time ago to spend it only when it would actually help, which was almost never. The sky above Duran 4 was cloud-covered and dark. Orbital strikes came from above. Rocks and caves did not stop energy weapons, but they absorbed blast radius and thermal spread. She had spent 2 weeks walking this valley and the ridges around it. She knew this terrain better than anyone else alive. She had 40 hours before a standard logistics window closed if she assumed the strike was already in preparation. Maybe 72. She did not know and could not know, and so she treated it as 40. She started with the communicator. It was half broken, but the broadcast antenna was intact. She turned it to maximum output and began recording. Everything. All of it. Her name, her origin, the abduction, the council chamber, Drell reading the offering protocol in his flat board voice. The bones of the previous offerings along the eastern ridge. Rook, 14 days of field notes. The drone footage she had heard through the cave walls as a distant hum 2 days ago. She spoke for 30 minutes without stopping, and she broadcasted on every frequency the communicator could reach, on repeat, and then she left it running at the base of her camp rock as a decoy signal. Then she went to find caves. She had seen the cave entrance on day 9, northeast of camp, a crack in the rock face wide enough to walk through and dark enough inside that she had not gone further without light. She had noted it and moved on. Now she pulled the one working light from her field pack and went back. The crack opened into a passage. The passage dropped steeply and then leveled. She went 40 meters in and found the roof still intact and the walls solid and the air cold but breathable. 40 meters of solid rock above her. Better than nothing. The problem was Rook. She went back to camp and stood in front of Rook and thought. The creature watched her. It had been watching her with that same patient attention since day 1, tracking her movements the way a very intelligent animal tracks the behavior of something it is still figuring out. She could not explain orbital strikes. She could not explain danger from the sky. She could not explain any of it. What she could do was walk into the cave and see if Rook followed. She picked up the warm, flat stone Rook had brought her on day 8. She had kept it in camp. It was smooth and dark and fit in both her hands. She held it out where Rook could see it. Then she turned and walked toward the cave. She did not look back. She just walked, holding the stone, moving at the slow, steady pace that Rook had matched since day 3. The ground vibration behind her started after about 20 meters. Rook did not like the cave entrance. It stopped at the crack in the rock face and made a sound that was not quite a growl, short and unhappy, and did not move. Nora went back to it. She touched its side with one flat hand. She stood there for a moment. Then she walked into the crack again. Rook followed. It was a very slow and unhappy process. Rook was large, and the passage was not built for large, and twice it stopped completely, and she had to go back and stand with her hand against its side for several minutes before it moved again. But it moved, 40 meters down and into the deep chamber, where it settled with its head low and its eyes pale and unhappy in the dark. She sat against it. She set the warm stone next to its nose. She talked in a low voice about nothing, about Montana, about the wolf study, about her sister Sarah, who would absolutely not believe a word of any of this. She left the communicator broadcasting at the surface and waited. The strike came on the 29th hour. The cave floor shook like a struck bell. The sound arrived a second later, a sound like every sound at once, compressed and enormous, rolling through the rock and into her bones. Rook pressed itself flat, all 4 legs down, head low. She pressed herself against its side and did not move. The shaking lasted 4 minutes. Then it stopped. Dust moved through the air. Somewhere above them rock had settled differently. But the ceiling held. Nora breathed. Rook breathed. The light in her field pack flickered once and held. Her communicator blinked on her wrist. The surface beacon had survived on backup power, and it was showing something she had not expected. 43 incoming signals. 3 days after the strike, a ship landed on the scorched surface of Duran IV. IT was not a council vessel. IT was a mid-range diplomatic transport, battered and fast, registered to a coalition of 7 smaller species who had received Nora's broadcast, shared it, and arrived before the council could decide what to do about that. Behind it, in orbit, were 4 more ships. Journalists, 2 independent scientific vessels, 1 trade delegation who had taken a sharp detour when the broadcast reached their frequency. Delegate Yun came down the ramp first. She was smaller than Nora had imagined from the 2-word message. Young, as far as alien ages could be read, with careful eyes and a formal posture that looked like it was covering a great deal of exhaustion. She walked across the burned rock to the cave entrance and stopped at a safe distance and waited. Nora came out first, then Rook. The people near the ship did not run. Most of them had seen the drone footage. They knew what was coming. But knowing and seeing were different things, and several of them stepped back without meaning to when Rook's full size became clear in the pale open air. 4 meters tall at the shoulder. Dark plating. Pale eyes scanning the gathered group with slow, deliberate attention. Nora put her hand flat on Rook's side. Not to restrain it. Just to be there. Rook stopped. Looked at the ship. Looked at the people. Looked at Nora. Then it sat down, very slowly, like a large thing that has decided something is acceptable and is now conserving energy, and looked at the sky. Yin let out a breath. Then she walked forward. They stood 2 meters apart on the burned rock and looked at each other. Yin had a formal document in her hand. Nora had her field recorder on her wrist and 17 days of notes and a filter mask she needed to replace. "I have a statement," Yin said. "Go ahead," Nora said. Yin read it in a clear voice. The offering protocol was suspended immediately pending full council review. Earth was granted provisional protected status under galactic law, meaning no council member could approach, contact, or interfere with Earth or its inhabitants without consent. Ambassador Drell had been recalled, and his authorization of the cleansing strike was under formal investigation. The Duran 4 territorial zone was declared protected pending biological and behavioral assessment. The last line was the one Yun had written herself and argued into the document at 3 in the morning 2 nights ago. She read it carefully. The creature designated as the territorial entity of Duran 4 is hereby granted provisional sentient recognition status, pending formal behavioral study. All existing offering protocol agreements citing this creature are void. Rook did not understand the words. But when Yin stopped speaking and the rock was quiet again, it turned its head and looked at Nora and made that low, brief sound that she had first heard on day 7, the one she had decided was not a growl, the one she had no good word for yet. She looked back at it. Then she looked at Yin. "What happens to this planet now?" she asked. "That depends partly on you," Yin said. "We need someone to lead the behavioral study, to document the creature formally, to make the case to the council that this designation should be made permanent." She paused. "You have 17 days of field data, functional contact with a subject, and you are alive on a planet where nothing alive has lasted 3 days in 200 years. You are the most qualified person in this system for the work." Nora looked out at the burned valley. The black rock formations were still standing. The overhang where she had built her camp was still there, scorched on the outside edge, but intact. The bones of the old offerings were still at the eastern ridge. The flat stone where she and Rook had exchanged small objects for days was still in the center of the valley. She looked at Rook, who was now lying fully flat on a patch of warm dark stone with both eyes half closed. The wound on its left flank was clean and healing. Sometime in the next week, she needed to check the sealant and possibly reapply. "Yes," she said. Yin nodded. She seemed relieved in a way that was bigger than the word, like she had been holding something heavy for a long time. That night, from a private corner of the diplomatic transport with a working long-range transmitter, Nora recorded a message for her sister Sarah. She described the planet, the purple sky, the black rock that held heat all day and let it go slowly at night. She described Rook lying on warm stone with its eyes half closed. She said it reminded her of their old dog back home, the one who used to lie in the sun on the back porch and not move for hours. She said Sarah was going to roll her eyes at that. She said she was staying. She clicked off the recorder and walked back out to the valley. The sky was dark. Rook was a large warm shape in the black, pale eyes just barely visible, tracking her approach the way it had tracked her on day 1, steady and patient. She sat down beside it. Opened her field notes to a clean page. At the top, in clear letters, she wrote, "Day 18. Real study begins now." The galaxy had sent her here to be forgotten. She had other plans.